Today, the recommendation for regular practice of meditation is coming from so many different sides. So that people coming for a retreat, let's say, they are bringing with them many ideas how to practice correctly. And especially people influenced by some pop culture spirituality, having the idea to put some nice music in the stereo and to let the mind glide away. Forget it. If you have sufficiently frustrated yourself with the do-it-yourself meditation, probably you will come to the appreciation of a classic instruction proven by great masters, seeing these many traps along the way. But even then, it may be not right in the beginning, but when there is some progress already and the practitioner starts to perceive the mind, then usually comes this question: how far should we put effort into our practice of meditation, and how far we should rather open up for the natural unfolding of practice? And it is a very good and serious question indeed. So let's look at it a little bit nearer. If I want to reflect some of the element of the practice, the first thing, I go to the original teachings, to the original suttas of the Buddha, the original discourses, to get the basic reference from there. And be sure, when we open these books, it will fly into our face. Sama Vayama, one of the 8 links of the Eightfold Noble Path. So it is there, and we can see what the importance and emphasis Buddha was giving on right effort. But 2 things I would like to notice. When there is a talk about effort, it is always connected with a prefix, right effort, Sama Vayama, indicating that the effort can be also wrong. That's the one thing. The other one, that it is the link number 6. It is not in the beginning of the Eightfold Noble Path. It is rather somewhere in the middle. Further, if we look into the scriptures, the right effort is described as the 4 padhanas, 4 great efforts. Padhana is just another term used in the Pali literature for effort. And the 4 padhanas: to avoid, to overcome, to develop, and to maintain. So great effort to avoid all the unwholesome mental states, unwholesome emotion, unwholesome thinking. But even in our everyday life, to avoid unwholesome motivation, unwholesome actions, unwholesome speech. The next, to overcome all the negativities which already developed in our mind, to overcome them. And let's be clear that the Buddha's teaching is giving lots of advices and tools to work and to overcome the negativities. In this context, I would even recommend to look into psychology, psychotherapy, because this new kind of methodology have sometimes quite effective tools, especially to deal with negative emotions. But further, the great effort to develop bhavana, developing all the good mental states and mental factors, wholesome mental factors, which are not yet developed. So to put quite some effort into developing them. And the fourth one, great effort to maintain all the good things we already have so that they don't slip away. You see, so this is the presentation of Samavayama, right effort, in the original scriptures. And if we look at it, it's a program for the whole life. Already this. But more than that, if we go to the scriptures, the effort appears also as one of the 7 factors of enlightenment. You see, even there. But it is not Vayama, it is called Virya, energy, victorious energy, endeavor. So etymologically, if we look for the meaning of the Virya, Vira means hero, heroic effort, you see, factor of enlightenment. In the Buddha's time, I remember there was another teacher called Mahavira, great hero. So it was used even as a name. Father, not finished. Father, going into the scriptures, Virya is also one of the very important mental factors. 5 mental factors, indriyas. It is one of them. And how important is to develop these 5 mental factors, because this is the tool to help us to move along the Eightfold Path. 5 indriyas. Interestingly enough, the same 5 appears also as the 5 mental powers, balas. But I would like to speak about the 5 mental faculties a little bit more in detail, because there is a message in that which I want to use as a ground for this talk. The 5 mental faculties, the chief is the mindfulness. This observing, noting quality, very important for insight. But then we have 2 pairs, and they are always presented as something which needs to be developed in a balanced way. The first pair, Saddha Vispanya, the faith and trust, balanced with deep understanding, with wisdom. And the Virya should be balanced with not relaxation, no, it is defined as Samadhi. And Samadhi in this context means kind of a tranquility or steadiness of focus. Concentration, sometimes it is translated as concentration, collectedness of the mind, I would say. Which is the definition for the beginning of this specific development. Later, when the Samadhi is developed to its full, it is a kind of a blissful abiding in the high, sublime octaves of consciousness, sometimes compared to the divine consciousness. But here, among the 5 faculties, the effort should be balanced with the steadiness of mind. So, that far from the scriptures, but also there are some kind of similes. Rowing a boat, so much effort, but where to? The direction. That the effort itself, it's only a mean for some purpose. When you are rowing, you are going backwards. So you have somebody in the back of the boat to control the direction. In the society today, so many burnout people. Did these people invest their life energy in a meaningful direction? Big question about that. how important it is. And therefore the Eightfold Noble Path does not start with effort, it starts with right view, with right understanding, what it is all about. That's the direction to go. Then you can put the effort and energy to accomplish this path. But in the scriptures, the right effort is even better. The right effort in the scriptures is compared to the musical instrument, lute. You know, with the strings. Today we would probably take guitar. I am personally familiar with that instrument. I was playing guitar as a layman. I loved it. And therefore I know so well how delicate it is to tune these strings so that you get a nice music. If the string is over tensed, it may break even. If it is too loose, it doesn't give any sound at all. And in fact, it is so sensitive, even a quarter of a tone out of the tune, and the music is horrible. So have this as a message from Buddha. What is the right effort? What is the wrong effort? Appropriate effort, according to the situation. And so in the meditation, I would say we have to check every 5 minutes the state of the mind. If it is too lazy and the mind goes easily into wandering mind, it is clear that some injection of energy is necessary to bring the kind of a presence back into the mind. If there are tensions somewhere in the body or in the mind, that is a clear indication that we should send true relaxation into this area of body or of mind, combined with loving kindness. That's the most effective kind of relaxing. Sending loving thoughts with relax, opening these areas which are somehow tense and closed. In this context, actually, the relaxation is actually part of the right effort. Let's understand it this way. If it is appropriately used. But to close this chapter, not only the intensity of the effort should be, or energy should be appropriate, also the quality, meaning the motivation. If the effort or this energy injection is motivated from ego, to get more, to have more, to become more, you know, this grasping attitude in the background of that move, mental move. So it is very probably going to create rather more tension in the body, in the mind. And this would be the wrong kind, wrong quality, or wrong kind of effort. The effort should come from the wisdom, from the positive side of our heart. Sometimes the practice can get so difficult, so that everything is down. But even then, when the effort and energy is most demanding, most necessary, even then it should come from the wisdom and the wholesome part of our heart. To round up this reflection, I would like to read a short, brief passage from a book by Jack Canfield, where he is reflecting his initial years in a Thai forest monastery when he was with the very famous master Ajahn Chah. Goes like this. My teacher Ajahn Chah said there are two basic ways of practice. One way of practice is to be comfortable. And it's valuable. You can sit a little and get yourself quiet. You can follow the daily schedule without much problem. You keep the precepts so you don't harm people and they start to like you. And everything becomes nicer in your life. It becomes more comfortable and more pleasant because you live a good life and you're peaceful. The other way to approach spiritual practice is not to be involved in trying to be comfortable, but rather to be free or liberated. And that way of practice has nothing whatsoever to do with comfort. Comfort may come and it may not. Sometimes it may be terribly uncomfortable. But its goal or its direction is not comfort. Its goal is freedom. It's a wonderful thing, and it is the real legacy of the Buddha. So I think here Ajahn Chah was talking generally about the spiritual practice, two different ways. In some way he may even made a reflection about the monks in his own monastery. Those who are practicing just to get this kind of a peaceful abiding, little bit comparable to the way of samatha, this blissful abiding stages of consciousness, very peaceful, very harmonious. People are coming into monasteries to connect with this kind of harmony and peace. But then there is also the other kind of practice, when the people really go for liberation of the mind, which means to have the courage to face all these negativities in the mind, to open up the negative emotions, the causes of these things, to go into the area of defilements, which is usually presenting this resistance, resentment, and to purify this kind of karmic sediments, we can say. And that's not comfortable path at all. There are so many different types of meditation. That's true. But what is common to all of them are two things: presence of mind and clarity of mind. Because without these two, it is not really a meditation. So this is common, but of course beside that, each type of meditation has its own particular qualities. Like for example the samatha I was talking about has the kind of a tranquility, this steadiness of focus and purity of mind, so that it can flip over into these sublime states of consciousness. That's for samatha. For insight meditation, for vipassana, very different. The presence of mind and clarity of mind, of course, it's there. But beside that, what is crucial is the detachment or disidentification and the precision of mindfulness. Very specific for insight meditation, to see the arising and passing away of each mental formation. But another types of meditation like metta, loving kindness meditation, presence of mind, clarity of mind, but also this all-pervading positiveness, directed to all the beings, in all directions. That's metta. But even prayers, a kind of meditation, conceptual meditation, not so much represented in the Western Buddhism, but in Asia, lots of prayers, of course. And it is the tuning of the heart with the ideal. It's a devotional. The quality, additional quality would be the deep devotion, talking to some deeper layer of one's own heart, by the way. So again, Anything and everything what is supporting and developing this presence of mind and clarity of mind is the definition of right effort in the sitting meditation. Anything what is over that or under that will not serve the purpose of sitting meditation. We can say that. But now also talking very practically about implementing effort into our practice. Also taking some reference to my own practice, which I am familiar with, which is rather the insight practice. The samatha practice may sometimes have slightly different rules. The insight practice has usually a primary meditation object of bodily nature, bodily sensation, bodily movement, or some touching sensations, bringing lots of beneficial qualities into our practice of meditation because it is grounding the whole process. Even if the in-breath and out-breath is taken as a primary meditation object, in fact, for insight, you are using the touching sensation on the upper lip or in the nostrils. With the further practice, usually the scope of awareness open up. The basis for this practice are the 4 satipatthana, 4 areas of mindfulness. The body, then comes the feeling, then comes the mind itself, and the function of the mind. But it is a gradual opening of the scope of mindfulness. And then it may happen that the mind kind of flips over and suddenly you are here. Wonderfully, the presence of mind is 100%. The mind does not go into the thoughts, really. The thoughts may come, they will go. Anything can come, anything will go. Because there is no grasping at these things. There is no identification with the thought. Everything is clearly seen as it comes, as it goes. And you are keeping this wonderful balance in the middle of your mental system. It is called effortless mindfulness. Because at this stage, to put any effort would be actually counterproductive. It would distort this ideal balance of the mind. As long as you have the primary meditation object of the bodily nature, you have to put some effort into your practice, because it is not the nature of the mind to stay long time with the bodily sensation, with the touching sensation, with the bodily movement. So you have to put some effort always when the mind goes off to become aware of it and to bring it back, to build up also the stability of the mind at the same time. But when this kind of effortlessness in the mind opens, what effort you would like to put to it? Nonsense. That's the time for the natural unfolding of the mind. There are some people who would like to start their practice just with this kind of a completely open awareness. It may be interesting experiment, that's true, but if you open up completely the mind, which is not ready for that, this kind of practice will go very quickly into wandering mind, and you will stay long time in wandering mind until the presence comes back. Another problem is that in the beginning there is always still identification with some elements of the mind. So even if it looks like becoming aware of that what is happening in the mind, it is not true really. Let it happen by itself. When the practice is ready for that, this kind of a full presence of mind, completely open in all sides, that will come by itself. Some confusion, I think, came from Mahayana, There are different traditions, Zen, Rinzai, Soto, many different teachings. One of these Mahayana teachings is that you are enlightened already. What do you want to add to that? Your Buddha nature is in your heart already. Just connect with that. Just connect with that. That's the point. It is a great teaching. I have great appreciation for it, but it is a different strategy. Don't think that that is an easier way. It is not easier at all. It is just a different formulation. It is the viewpoint from the complete realization. Everything is enlightened. Everything is as it is, You don't need to believe that. So there were some ideas coming from Zen that any kind of effort is actually disturbance of the process. I would say this kind of instruction is good when already this kind of openness happened. So that was the first part of this talk, talking about right effort. Now, in the second part, I would like to reflect about the natural unfolding of the spiritual path. It sounds so beautiful, as if it would be a kind of a counterpart to the effortful striving for realization. Now, this beautiful organic kind of an opening, connecting with the deep layers of one's own heart, and let the spiritual path opens in its natural kind of unfolding, development. Beautiful, but there is a kind of a concern, kind of worry about it. Why concern? Because you don't have completely under your control the direction of that unfolding. Of thinking perhaps at this moment about the few people, those who went evidently a completely wrong direction. That would be extreme. No, I would like rather to think of these very good and wholesome aims of spiritual path. But even then, there is a kind of a choice, kind of varieties. I would call it the spiritual intelligence, which is decisive for the direction of the spiritual unfolding, especially of the natural one. So we have now IQ, the worldly kind of intelligence, coefficient. We have EQ, emotional intelligence. That was introduced by Daniel Goleman. Wonderful book, Emotional Intelligence. Actually being more decisive for the happiness in our life than the IQ, the normal kind of intelligence. The happiness is not coming from our intellectual skills. But I would introduce spiritual intelligence. What is meant by that? There are two components in that. The natural kind of calling for the truth, for the liberation, for something which is really real. This will be the call of the heart. But I was already talking about that. That would be just one component of the spiritual intelligence. The other one would be the understanding what it is all about, what our life is actually part of, our existence, our existential situation in the allness. And this would be rather a kind of a conceptual understanding which in the Buddhist classic Eightfold Noble Path is the link number 1. Right view, samadhi, deep understanding of the existential situation of everybody. If we look into scriptures, The kind of motivation for spiritual quest is usually described as Samvega, the sense of urgency. It is true that it is not the only one. I am always mentioning also the other kind of a gravitation of our heart towards something which is really pure, really genuine, really true and beautiful, kind of fulfillment, realization, liberation of the heart. This is a natural kind of a gravitation. It is the beauty. We should be inspired also by the beauty of the spiritual path, even when it is sometimes so difficult. But it's true that the majority of the inspiration rather comes from deep disillusionment, when everything in our life, all the values and expectations are crumbling down and we are in a state of despair. Samvega, sense of urgency to do something with this existence, with the condition of the human life. And the Samvega can come from many things. Let's say a death of a loved one, somebody we love, and death can open a big gate of emptiness in our heart. Or our career, our life expectation somehow crumbling down, dissolving, leaving us completely empty. So another kind of Samvega inspiration. Or illness, very serious illness, suddenly life expectation closing down. But this type of Samvega is temporary, and usually as the life goes up and down, after some years another loving romance can take place. The things in our life reorders and restructures, and the life has a meaning again, and new horizon opens, and the Samvega, the inspiration for the spiritual path, may dry up. So this kind of Samvega is not very stable. Even it can be quite strong one. If we look in the life story of the Siddhartha Gautama, the becoming Buddha, that's an example for Samvega which is very stable. Because, as you know, probably the history of his renunciation, that was this consideration of old age, sickness and death as a condition of every human being. And this kind of Samvega does not change throughout the life. Of course, we can become more blind to that, or more open and admissive to that reality. But this condition is with us, with all of us, for the whole lifetime. And this propelled Siddhartha for his spiritual quest, seeking liberation from old age, sickness and death. But in my personal case, it was again different. My Samvega, if I should speak about that, I know it is not everybody's cup of tea, but I will speak about it anyway. I have to go back 45 years back, in my age 23, 24. At that age I was completely non-religious, even non-spiritual, perhaps a little bit philosophical. And at that age I encountered for the first time the Buddha's original teaching. It was such a strong, breathtaking event for me, kind of an awe that in that day, actually at that night, it completely redirected the direction of my life. And now, 45 years back, still on the track without moving a millimeter. I made so many mistakes on the way, not necessary to speak about that. So many steps to the right side, to the left side, many of these kind of sidesteppings. But the original kind of motivation or direction didn't move a millimeter. What was it? I call it the opening of spiritual dimension of my mind and my heart. To describe it in a brief way, what I started to understand, that almost all the religions and almost all the spiritual system are actually helping hands reached to the blind humanity. Talking about the laws of the allness, where the human sphere of existence is just a thin layer of phenomena and its interpretation of appearances, in this enormousness, including all, what is, even that what isn't. No scientific proofs, don't expect scientific proofs in the spiritual sphere. But even scientifically, the probability that our human world, our human cosmos and human universe, even with the black matter and black energy and wormholes and black holes, white holes, even scientifically to consider that this is the only reality which exists, that is absurdity, that's absolutely improbable. Why it should be so? When even now there are hundreds of television programs crossing my body, crossing my brain, and I have no idea about it at all. And of course, this television program still belongs only to our worldly frequency of reality. You know, giving it just an example how blind and limited we are already in our own human sphere. Now, why the allness should be limited only to that what we can perceive or measure? Why? Nonsense! This was the kind of breaking of the shell. Suddenly this idea, there are another worlds, another dimensions of existence, quite possible, quite probable. And that the religions and the spirituality are bringing kind of reports about the laws governing this allness. And I became very, very serious at that moment. So this was my beginning. And of course, Buddhism supports, the original teaching supports this picture very much. There are things which are actually not really provable within our human experience scientifically. There are four things: karma, rebirth, endless rebirth, circle of rebirth called samsara, and bhumi, the different spheres, different planes of existence. These are the four things which widely are object of belief in Buddhism or disbelief, But as I said, you cannot use the scientific methodology in the spirituality. What I am using is rather measuring these concepts with the voice of my heart, if it resonates or not. And this proved to be quite a meaningful and relevant tool for assessment what's true and what's not in the religions and in the spirituality in general. Because let's be clear that even in the religious system especially, there are many cultural overlays, many even political overlays. There are many organizatory things relevant for the human sphere of that particular organization, not directly connected with the aim of liberation. And in spirituality it is certainly better. There are not so many organizatory or worldly things, but even that, testing it if it resonates with my heart. This thing is a very valuable tool to develop. It will not happen by itself. You have to develop this connection with the center or with some deep layer of your heart. It is called the inner teacher, the inner guru. To open up the connection with this instance of our heart. It may be not the last truth. There are many layers of the heart. And we are living on the surface. But we need to learn to connect with the deeper layers of heart. And so, after working on this, at the beginning of my spiritual path, for about 2 years I was developing this quite intensively. I had no teachers whatsoever, so this was the only reference I could get. And it is very valuable. Later on, it was very useful when I started to teach. So many questions coming from the people. If you answer only with that what you read in the books, you can serve better if you can also become silent, let the question go down, and let be the channel for the kind of response. So this kind of truth checker I was using for this kind of a frame around the Buddha's teaching, karma. There are indications, even in our contemporary human life, the karma works, of course, within our life. But because we have distorted scale of values, usually we don't understand it properly. It works even within one life to some extent. But if you speak about the law of karma, it needs to open up the picture to the rebirth, that only in the many, many lifetimes the karmic justice is taking place. So these are the things, and the bhumis, the levels of existence in the enormousness. So these are the 4 things which in the Buddha's teaching are clearly presented. The teaching is, so to say, put into this frame, but it works even without the frame. So there are many people who do not actually consider these things around it, and still they are getting great benefit from practicing Buddha's teaching. But let me continue. Alone, this opening to the great picture of our existential infliction, well, let's to say, what we are part of, actually, as a human being. This was not yet the source of real Samvega. Because Okay, so when the body dies, the existential impulse continues and calls another mind and body together, so there is a rebirth and continuation. So that's the Buddhist teaching, the endless rebirth in different spheres of existence. Now it starts to get serious. In different spheres of existence, to be reborn. Okay, where? The New Age spirituality is very brave describing this higher echelons of existence and how beautiful, excellent and wonderful, blissful it is. But still, there is a kind of a lifespan, the kind of a life term. And the Buddhism is quite clear that beside this angelic and godlike, even immaterial spheres of existence, there are also many, many spheres of existence which are much lower than the human one. The real spheres of misery and utter suffering, and the Buddhism is so clear about it. The thing is that all of these spheres of existence are mind-made. This I did not know at the beginning. It came only much later with the practice of insight meditation, but also reflecting about things and even quantum physics, looking at these things from the scientific point of view. That the whole enormousness with all the beings inside is just an enormous consciousness game of consciousness. But for the beings locked in this game, the reality appears as real as our human one, which even this one, even the human one, is just a game of appearances. It is not a real reality, that what we are living around us. It's just a game of consciousness. And how real it can appear, and how real we are trapped in that. But that does not help us. Even this knowledge itself does not really liberate us from the bliss and from the horror. Let's take both of them. Now, understanding what actually is the helping hand of the religions and spiritual systems, they are, most of them, not all of them, but many of them, are actually giving advice how to be reborn in some higher sphere of existence. That the next existence will be the beautiful one. That's the service of most of the religions, including certainly Christianity. No, but not all of the religions. But what the Buddhism has to say to that when that positive karma is spent, the next rebirth after will be in some lower spheres of existence. And that starts to be the source of my Samvega. And as I understand Buddha's teaching, bodhi, the full enlightenment means to wake up from this allness madness into the freedom of nirvana, the freedom of the unmanifested, when everything is in balance, unmanifested, unborn, uncreated. The final liberation. So this is my understanding, and believe this does not change throughout ups and downs of the life. But the full and definitive realization of Nibbana it is not the only aim in the whole Buddhist system. It is the ultimate goal, of course. But many practicing people actually have much modest kind of aim. For example, just to eliminate unnecessary suffering from this present life. Already that is quite something. But people who are really considering the endlessness of rebirth in the samsara, they would sometimes go for the second level of aim, which would be the very wholesome kind of rebirth within the samsara, working on the path further, keeping the direction. And it can be any of these higher spheres of existence, even again the human one. That's not so important, just to continue the work. That would be the hallmark of this second kind of aim of practicing people. Then after there is long time nothing, and then comes the third kind of aim within the Buddhist teachings. And that would be just to be reborn in heaven, or just to be reborn among the gods. It is not very celebrated in the Buddhist teaching, this kind of aim, because there are quite some question marks around that. And as I already said, the beings in a happiness, they have not much motivation to do good things. They are rather enjoying their pleasures, spending the good karma. And when the good karma is spent, of course, the rebirth after, even when these happy abidings are extremely long, they are not endless. There will be rebirth again. And then it will be in some lower plane of existence. So therefore, just to be reborn in heaven or among the gods, not a big thing in the system of Buddhist teachings. Now, as you may know, I became quite personally interested in near-death experiences, because this seems to be the first clear, solid indicator that the mind can continue even when the body dies, when the brain dies, when the neuronal activities completely cease, that the mind continues its own existence. I did quite some research in that field. I made a very long talk, a very detailed talk about it. You can find it in YouTube. It is called NDE and Buddhism. Near-death experiences and Buddhism. And in that explorative talk, I was exploring the phenomena from scientific point of view of neuroscience, from psychological point of view, and from spiritual point of view, trying to come to one clear understanding of that mysterious phenomena, and eventually to draw conclusion from that. So I certainly recommend to go to that information. There is lots of information in internet about that near-death experience phenomena, when even people were sometimes reporting, people with cardiac arrest were, after coming back into their body, reporting what was happening around the dead body at the time of clinical death, when there was definitely no neuronal functions at all. But in the time I made this video, I had the information of the first generation of the researchers, like Raymond Moody, like Bruce Grayson, or Peter Fenwick, or Pin van Lommel, Kenneth Ring, you know, did this, and many others, these first pioneers. But the statistic from their research was very positive, that most of the Western people having near-death experience, they were experiencing this enormous beauty, this excellency, spiritual kind of a divine love and sphere of deep understanding, high-level spiritual beings explaining many things, deep understanding and beauty and bliss and all that. And only some would have this kind of a horror near-death experience. So that was the statistic of the first generation of research. But now coming the second generation, and encountering the work of Eric Dudois, clinical psychologist in Marseille. Eric Dudois, in the Hôpital de Timon in Marseille. He works with the people who had a negative near-death experience, coming back into the body with a very deep PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. Cannot sleep, horrified to die again, to go through this again. And of course, Eric is a psychologist, so he developed a kind of a theory why some people have this kind of a horror when the brain is dying. His theory, if I understood it correctly, he calls these people extremely sensitive, that some traumatic event in their life, they could not survive it. They repressed it in subconsciousness to survive mentally. But of course, in the time of dying, the controlling functions of the brain are losing its strength, and this repressed contents, negative horror contents, is flooding the mind, creating this hell imaginary. So that's understanding of Eric Dudois. It is partially agreeing with the Buddhist understanding of negative events after the body dies. According to Buddhist teaching, decisive is a karma activated in the time of dying. And if it was some kind of a negative karma, so at least the transition period before the next rebirth could be horror-like, and perhaps even the next rebirth. The difference is quite sensitive. In Eric's understanding, in a psychological understanding, traumatic experience, usually the person is a victim of something. But in Buddhist understanding, the bad karma, negative karma, is consciously created actively. Oh, that's a very, very important difference in understanding what is causing this kind of a hell experience, near-death experience. But anyway, so Eric has the method, applying psychological method, to speak about that experience a lot, sharing, integrating that by talking about it with another people. Not necessarily with your surrounding, but there are clubs of near-death experiencers, and they are open to hear these stories, to understand it correctly. There are forums in internet possible to share. Anyway, so that's the Eric Dudois contribution, and what is perhaps the most striking of his messages, that statistically in his research, the negative near-death experiences are more common in a majority, and the positive ones are minority. And I understand it if somebody comes with a sheet of questions for a statistic research. People with negative near-death experience will be reluctant to share their horror. But if Eric comes with the intention to help them, so they will open up. That the negative near-death experiences are underreported. That was my suspicion already half a year ago. Good to say, good to repeat that the intensity of these experiences is so strong, it is never forgotten throughout the life. It is so strong. And it feels so extremely real, more real than this world around us. That's the red flag really around all this. Even if you may say it is just the game of consciousness or mind, that's what it is. That's what even this worldly existence is, with all the science and atom energy and all that, how it can get intensive. Okay. Today, the Buddhist teaching in the West are mostly presented without this framework. Because, as I said, it is not everybody's cup of tea. And even opposite, it's a cup of tea of few of us, I would say. In Asia it is different. Majority of people is somehow clear about afterlife. The Western people, probably blinded by the materialistic trends and overestimation of material science, are not easily jumping on this train. I know that. And so, as I already said, Buddha's teaching presented even without the frame of karma, rebirth, samsara, bhumis, it works. And it helps people to get more meaning into their life, to avoid unnecessary suffering, to grow spiritually. So why to bother at all? Should we bother at all about this frame? In my personal understanding, and underlying this, it is my personal understanding, this what I call secular Buddhism, Buddhism for the therapy sake. The secular Buddhism, the people can get even enlightened, that's true. But the enlightenment in this type of motivation is usually the Sotapanna or Sakadagami, which are the lower levels of enlightenment and liberation. For the full realization, the original kind of motivation by Samvega is necessary. Okay, enough talking. With the frame or without the frame. Take what is more inspiring you, what is more relevant for you, because you need this deep resonance of the heart as a basic inspiration for the spiritual path. Take also knowledge, that what is the beginning of the Eightfold Noble Path, the right view, right deep understanding of the existential situation we are part of. And then practice, follow the spiritual path, if possible to the end, to experience the real happiness, the real freedom of the heart.